Okay, all right. Thanks everyone for joining. This is a very, very exciting discussion and panel we've brought together here for the Digital Art Fair. My name is James. I'm one of the co-founders of the Digital Art Fair, and we're really going to explore AI and machine learning in this panel and how it's affecting our lives and cultural aspects of our lives, including art. Especially, we've got Refik, who's been working on this cutting edge of art, which is generative art, in my opinion, where, up until now, art has always been static, whether it was a picture or a video, maybe it changes over time or changes in situation, but generally it's the same. But now we have art which constantly updates and learns and reacts to its environment and its inputs. And that's a fascinating thing where we're going. And then we have leading experts from the field, from Hong Kong, from Rotterdam, and my great friend David from Google X. So I'll try and say as little as possible, and then just let the geniuses impart their wisdom on us today. So I guess I'll start by introducing Refik, my new friend and my partner in pulling this thing together and this project. So Refik, if you want to do a short introduction about yourself and how AI and machine learning is affecting what you're doing, that'd be great.
Yes. So first of all, good morning, everyone from London. I am like in a nomadic zone, traveling between multiple cities and so on. Great to be here together with you all in virtual space. I'm a media artist and director practicing last 13 years and the last 10 years with data and last 5 years with AI, specifically visual intelligence. I did my residency at Google 5 years ago and pioneered aesthetics of AI in different contexts. I've been working with computer graphics and advanced sensor ideas about the future of architecture. And my aim is basically bring media arts into architecture purposefully to create a near future scenarios where nothing is anymore science fiction, but more like a near future here. Experiences working with neuroscience, specifically working with EEG, fMRI, DTI, also like physiological data from heart rate to skin conductivity to so on, like trying to understand how can we make the invisible visible, but also try to create emotional narratives through the data paintings and data sculptures.
Wonderful. Okay. And next we have Marina Verzier, who's the Director of Research at the New Institute. Marina?
Hi, it's an honor to be here with all these amazing panelists. Yeah, I'm Marina Otero. I'm an architect. So my entry point through these questions is through the point of view of architecture and automation in particular. And I'm Director of Research at the New Institute. It's a National Institution of Architecture, Design and Digital Culture in the Netherlands. And in parallel, I'm a curator, have been working with different forms of investigations connected to artificial intelligence and the distinctions between humans and machines. And at the Design Academy Eindhoven, I'm the director of the Masters in Social Design. So also brings questions about the ethics of all these debates. So looking forward to the conversation as well.
Wonderful. And next we have Richard William Allen, who is the Dean of School of Creative Media at CityU. Richard?
Hello, I'm a film and media scholar by training, and since I've become Dean of the School of Creative Media, where we do cutting edge work in digital media and digital art, I've become very interested in the question of machine learning, both from a philosophical standpoint, the problem of machines and consciousness, which I've thought about for a long time, all the way back to my undergraduate days in philosophy, and at the same time, interested in what machine learning can afford in terms of an amplification and expansion of what is possible in creativity and art. And so that's why I'm here.
Okay, wonderful. And then next, last but not least, is David Andre, who I've known for almost a decade now. And I love the hair as well, David. David is Chief Science Officer at Google X. He's a luminary in machine learning. He's been doing it for 30 years. Yeah, I mean, we're so happy to have him here on the panel. So David.
Thanks, James. I'm very happy to be here. I've been interested in the confluence of technology and art for a long time. in undergrad, I did a lot of work in theater, and I'm just amazed at all the things that are coming to pass now. My work currently at Google X, I'm advising a lot of the early stage projects. Most of them are secret, so I can't talk about them. I will mention some more mature projects that Google X has done today, and look forward to our discussions.
If you could just mention one or two secrets, we'll promise not to tell anyone.
That's what everyone says.
Okay. So yeah, let's kick into it. I mean, obviously, machine learning and AI have been involved in the cultural space for many years. We've had everything from HAL 9000 through to Skynet and the Terminator. And, there's all this fear, obviously, that we're going to make the machines more intelligent than us and they're going to take over. Obviously, we have Ray Kurzweil in the Singularity, and he's predicting by 2045 or even sooner, we're going to have an explosion in intelligence that we won't be able to control. And either the decision is for us to merge with machines and the AIs or be subservient in some ways. So, I think that's, kind of an interesting part to kick off on. And what makes us human, and how can we better understand ourselves, and how can we be involved in this machine learning progress and, being part of the process. David?
Ooh, these are good and big questions. It's very easy to be afraid of what we don't understand. I think that's been true for many decades. There's stories written about it, from long ago about the possibility of the Uber AIs taking over. The reality is far more brittle and less compelling. Computers still fall over themselves if they're not given really clear instructions. My colleague Andrew Ng once said, we have to worry about the rise of AI about as much as we have to worry about overcrowding on Mars, right? And I kind of share his belief on this. It is something we need to think about. We need to think very much about the ethics of using machine learning because we're already seeing a lot of issues with that in our society. But as for the day when we have to worry about the robots and Skynet and things like that, I think that's still science fiction mostly.
Okay. And Richard, anything to add on that subject?
Well, I'm glad to hear David say that.
I think we all are.
From a perspective of knowledge, well, I mean, I think that, as you know, I think that sometimes the dangers of AI and machine intelligence are overplayed, but in a sort of in a predictive sense. But I also think that those dangers are partly overplayed because we insist on conceptualizing machines as intelligent beings. We are seduced into thinking that machines can create and can think and can imagine and do all those things. And I think that conceptual error feeds into the sense or the worry about the potential power of machines. Why is it a conceptual error? Well, it would take probably all day to go into this, but at its root, I think the error is to ascribe things like imagination and creativity and memory to machines, which are only really ascribable, logically ascribable or meaningfully ascribable to persons or animals who behave in ways that are like persons, because we ascribe these things not on the basis of what happens in our gray matter in our brains, but on the basis of how we behave and how we respond and how we react to things. And those are deeply human and shared with the higher animals, deeply human behaviors. And it's only in the context of those behaviors that it makes sense to ascribe things like memory and imagination and so on to an entity. So I think that if we change the way we think about machines, I think it helps us not to draw the alarmist conclusions about them.
Okay. And Refik, obviously you've produced a number of works called Machine Memories, Machine Hallucinations, and you're very deep in using machine learning and AI to express yourself creatively. So I'd love to hear your thoughts as well.
I guess I don't know, there was some very interesting dialogue recently in another amazing panel. I watched Blade Runner when I was 8 years old. So I think because of I think Richard, maybe you were in that panel as well with the Morris and many others. And there was a very great talk about, perhaps I am very young, that I didn't like have any negativity of life in my mind. I only reflect very positive feelings to one of the most dystopic movies in the world. So if you think about, like, I think how we reflect, how we think, and how we imagine future, it's exactly what technology means to me. So however we use it, however we dream it, and however we shape it, it's exactly what it is. And it's kind of a mirror mode. So for me, if I think about if a machine can learn, can a dream question, it's so childish. It's so like a friend, another friend, like trying to be the team, another, like, you know, thinking brush concept. So I don't feel any negativity. In fact, I feel creativity, and in the most like advanced version of it. So a machine
Partnership.
cannot forget.
You feel like a partnership.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Completely. And it's a very true collaboration, a tool making. And then it becomes like a much more creative. And also the question is, I mean, we are surrounded by so many negativity about like how technology can, you know, collapse humanity and those, you know, dystopian narratives. I found myself, that's very easy to imagine, but I found myself much harder. What else can we do with that? How can we use these same ideas and technology to create something more creative? To me, the second one is extremely much challenging than just try to narrate some, you know, dark dystopians. So I take the other way, and in a world where everything is not so positive, why not I'm bringing another negativity? I want to bring positivity to the world. So my feelings are coming from this positivity, not ignoring or a wishful thinker, not saying that nothing can go wrong, but still you can be thoughtful and generate inspiring and motivating and asking new questions with the technologies I think we have. So my take is in the very positive, in the very optimist side.
Wonderful to hear. Marina?
Yeah, perhaps in my case, I'm first interested in questioning what human means. So there have been many conversations about that are questioning actually what the human is in fact. And you can take it from very different points of view. One is biology, acknowledging that we are made of bacteria mostly, or many other ways. So I think what interests me is to try to go beyond the Cartesian categories in which, you know, we have been putting different beings in different pockets, like animals and plants and humans, and those categories are increasingly blurring. And what it means to me is that generally we also conceptualize the machine as something or an intelligence that is at the service of the human. And this differentiation and this positionality of the human as above the machine and above animals and other beings has been, of course, the cause of many of the maladies of our time. So for me, thinking about the future is precisely thinking about a non-human or more than human future in which machines as well are treated equally at the same time. So I'm personally not scared of machines or artificial intelligence getting very smart, because it might happen that they are as smarter than humans, and therefore the future of this planet is in better hands. It could be the opposite as well. But what I'm trying to go to is that I've seen how too often these distinctions and categories served for the exploitation on certain beings. And that's a historical construction, how different beings that had not been treated or categorized as humans have been served for, forms of exploitation and slavery and so on. And, you know, it's the same in the conceptualization of machines. So what I'm interested in is like thinking through machines and artificial intelligence as part of the human, or part of all the other beings that, in my opinion, could coexist in different ways, not under the construction or the category of the human.
Okay, wonderful. I just wanted to use a quote from Clarke's Law. It said, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic to those who don't understand it. So what would you say sets us apart from these computers and these machine learnings in terms of, they're going to be much faster, much quicker, and much better than us at pattern recognition and pattern identification. So yeah, how do we separate ourselves, and how do we stay up on top of them, and what makes us better or superior? Yeah, who wants to take it? David?
Sure, I can kick us off. This is a great question, and everyone from science fiction writers to technologists have been thinking about it and writing about it for a long time. I've consistently had the philosophy on it that all tools that we make, all technologies that we make, can be used for good or for harm. And the challenge in setting these things up is, what are they for? Why are you making it? How does it fit into people's lives? Because we're making it for purposes and for intentions. Like when Tesla engineers work on their cars and all the amazing machine learning that's going on in there so that they can essentially do self-driving, all of that is for the purpose of keeping people safe, right? This is machine learning. It's not going to take over. It doesn't have that intention, right? It's not part of it. And so I think that's one very important way. By having intentions be set up well from the beginning, we don't allow some of the futures that people sometimes worry about, right? Everyone always jumps to, if it gets created and it gets intelligent, it's going to go badly. They're going to try to take over. They're going to try to take control. Well, since we are writing their purposes and creating them, right, to some degree, we can put forth how this can go. And I'm on the optimist side, I think, like Refik as well. And that's the future that I want to help build, the one I want to see.
Okay. And Richard?
Well, your question was what sets us apart from the machines, and David's answer was, I think, a solidly empirical answer, which is that human beings actually are the ones that create and imagine and manipulate and use the machine, and I think that's a good answer. I would say that what sets us apart from humans, apart from machines, is the fact that we are human. And first of all, that means being a biological creature, which machines are not. And secondly, that means being a language user, language using species who have developed a very rich and widely ramified culture or cultures over millennia. And those features of being human simply radically mark us out from machines.
Aren't we as humans really doing our own pattern recognition, our own cultural recognition and mimicking in some ways? And now that the machines are learning how to do that, and we're getting closer and closer to the Turing test point, what does that throw into the mix?
Well, I think just the very way you phrase it, I mean, pattern recognition. I mean, you think about, well, what's the role of pattern recognition in human culture? Well, it's one of myriad features of human culture. Machines are good at doing very, very, very specific things. Algorithms are designed are good at doing very, very specific things. Which have a very specific domain of application.
Okay.
Maybe,
yeah, Marina?
Yeah, I think, yeah, for me, what I will add is that data and machines are the per excellence human design. And that's why they are human, in fact. There is nothing more human than those constructions that were not previously in what is generally called nature. So I cannot see them as completely different from the human or something apart. In that sense, human intelligence is in fact machine, and human intelligence is data. There is no possibility to differentiate them, according to me. But there are also much smarter people like Reza Negarestani and many others that actually question, well, we are all the time thinking about what is this that differentiate us from an artificial intelligence, but actually do know what the human intelligence is about. And actually, should it be something that has to be preserved? Or maybe taking as Refik as well, this kind of future-oriented, approach, thinking perhaps there is too much holding on to the notion of the human. And I think in many ways it can be redefined because, as I said before, it didn't lead to such obviously beautiful creations of art and culture, but also very violent outcomes. So perhaps there is an opportunity, instead of holding on to what makes humans, actually what other categories could emerge, perhaps by identifying ourselves with other beings, including thinking us as also artificial intelligence and machines.
Refik, I think this one's over to you now.
Yes, so I think incredible text on incredible visions. I think it's pretty like, from my humble view, while we are still discussing what is consciousness, that rabbit hole is still extremely unknown. Quantifying consciousness, while it's physical, right? We hit our head and we lose our consciousness. But I mean, in between, what it is truly is a very massive question of science, philosophy, and so on. So I'm not very much in that, again, fear of machines, can they decide or, become these sentient beings, which is completely fine. I was saying to like a couple of friends, like if one day machine wants to have its own culture and that culture wants to make its own art, I'm very happy to ask the question, are we having that machine as a living being or not? Are we accepting or not? To be honest, this is like the breaking point. Till that breaking point, I think we are just speculating and reflecting our, vision and desire and imagination and creativity to something that doesn't have any, being, right? The consciousness. So, but the good news is, I guess, again, so while we are, in the searching the unknown of what is consciousness, I think we have a lot of time to reflect creativity. And that creativity, of course, can be dystopian or utopian or whatever your vision is. I feel like we have the opportunity to like go beyond our imagination. For example, I don't know how to draw very well since my childhood, because I think maybe playing games and other things allow me to like code earlier or do things with machines and suddenly disconnect me from a pen and pencil, but doesn't mean that I don't have a thinking brush, right? So now I can say I have a thinking brush that is very different than a normal web brush, or now the canvas for me become a like architecture or built environments or a ceiling or a human body. So I think what I would like to say is the amount of potential creativity around the machines are as good as once we have the like, printing or photography or, when the internet like arrives. I think we have a very similar renaissance here. And with the NFTs, of course, with like blockchain context, and now we have another living being as a canvas. I mean, this is all like, to me, very well connected narratives. Nothing is like overhyped, nothing is overly produced. It's just a perfect, humanity asking the question, like anything in the past in humanity's findings with fire or tools. It's very similar to me.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. The first person who saw fire thought that was magic and, an impossibility. And now, every new level of technology, someone feels the same.
And by the way, with the same technology, we make communities, right? And connect each other, make music and food and connect. With the same technology, we, destroy each other. So it's always 50-50%, I think, with any technology in life.
Yeah. Well, that leads very well on to the next question. So the debate between humans and machines, what are some of the ethical consequences of the technology? I think, David, we were talking in the pre-panel before about society's total intolerance for machine learning and Google Drive in particular to have any accidents, even though it would be a vast improvement on human error and letting humans drive. And then the other thing, of course, that I wanted to ask about is about if machines are allowed to have a consciousness, do we then have to start thinking about ascribing a rights, like citizen sort of rights to these machine or these machine learnings or these communities of machines? So yeah, I don't know who to give this one to first. Richard.
Well, I think that the ethical questions around AI and machine learning are really urgent ones. I mean, and I think that the question of consciousness is another issue, but the speed, pervasiveness, and largely invisibility of these processes in the invisibility of the role that these processes have in our everyday life is a real cause of concern. I mean, you know, the average human being, for the average human being, a lot of their decisions are being made by impersonal algorithms whose processes we don't really understand. Decisions about what we eat, what movies we see, what music we listen to, you know, what individuals we date. You know, all these things are being mediated now by algorithms. And as we all know, the algorithms are not these perfect, objective and, you know, processes. They're, as David points out, man-made, and they have all the foibles and biases of the culture and the constraints of their makers. And I think that this is worrying, and the question becomes, and not to mention the role of corporations in all this. You know, and essentially, you know, a few very large corporations having more role influence on people's everyday lives than their own governments. And there's very little control over these corporate entities in terms of what they can and cannot do. And of course, this is really the big dilemma of our age. What makes sense as policy in terms of corporate oversight? Who does that oversight? You know, what kind of guidelines are there? Who act as the, you know, the wise men or women who actually, you know, are making the ethical decisions? Should it be a more democratic process? How would one democratize this? These are massive, massive challenges, I think.
Well, I think this is perfect time to ask David, one of the wise men who's creating these algorithms. David? I think you're on mute, David.
No, I just unmuted. I hope you can hear me now.
Yeah.
So these are challenging questions, and Google is not alone, and Google also has these teams looking very hard at ethics in AI and machine learning, because these issues are pervasive, complicated, and require nuanced solutions in a lot of cases. One of my favorite ways to approach problems like this is to gather a very diverse set of voices to really understand where the problems are and where they could come from. And then to use all the tools at our disposal to try to help fix the problems. One of the best ways to look at trying to stop deepfakes from happening is to use sophisticated technology and machine learning, AI, and some interesting security tricks, right? Using machine learning.
Is it an arms race then?
Yes, of course it is. Yeah. It's an arms race. If we have bias in our training data for training large language models, what's the best way to find that? Use our technology to examine that data carefully and try to identify that bias, find it, and get better data, right? We can, you know, we mentioned before that every tool can be used for good or for evil, and I want to choose to use them for good.
Okay. Marina?
Yeah, I mean, there are many ways of entering in these questions about the ethics of technology. I mean, in my case, what for me is important is also how, like, the construction of the other, as I said before. So when we position like artificial intelligence or machines at the service of the human, we are constructing a particular understanding of the other as an entity that offers support. What triggers the fear is that suddenly that other takes too much intelligence and power and reveals as something that can trigger or can challenge a human. And in fact, that to me brings many different histories into mind. So two things, maybe one is, the bias. The industry has to look very closely at the biases that are at play in how these technologies are designed. At the same time, regulation should be in place, and especially in relation to corporations. But I would say that I'm not that scared about decision-making processes, because I think maybe many times we are talking from the perspective of a very privileged person who always had the chance to take decisions. And now maybe we are like scared that an algorithm is telling us where to dine or where to go. But society has been having those roles assigned for long enough. So as a woman or as a person of color or many other constructions of categories in which bodies have been categorized, there are certain social constructions, forms of patriarchy, forms of mediation, social or religious norms that have been also leading into certain particular behaviors. So I'm just trying to put things in perspective, because it's not that free will is always enacted in every moment of history, and now we are worried that an algorithm is giving us suggestions. And I understand the fear, I also have it, but at the same time I want to look at it in a more bigger perspective. But to summarize, yes, I believe that has to be the bias in the industry, has to do also with the type of people working in the industry. And I think that is also part of a transformation that has to happen and everywhere else.
Yeah, I guess you could say, like, even back in ancient Rome, people would use the power of the mob or the crowd to manipulate society to achieve their goals. In a similar sort of way, they're manipulating and tweaking and pulling and pushing to create outcomes. So it's been always a part of society for millennium in some ways.
As you were saying before about magic, if you think about the construction of the automaton, the Europeans, when they were going to to Baghdad or Damascus, and they were looking into these constructions, these early robots and automatons, they were thinking that was magic. And they were thinking that they could battle or fight these, entities or devils with Christianity, with religion. So this always at play many different understandings of our relation with technology, and sometimes through magic, through religion, through also very constructions of rational constructions connected to the Cartesian thinking, and all of them have been challenging at some point. So we are just in a very unknown territory in which all these categories and these notions and ideas of what human is, what humanity is, what are being contested in many different ways.
Okay, and Refik, over to you. I guess from your perspective as an artist, what are the ethical implications of working with AI and machine learning, and how to ascribe what's the artistic process and the machine process? If there's any sort of angles or avenues you can contribute on that front.
Yes, so I think a little bit back, maybe 10 years ago around this time, I made my first data sculpture, and I was able to use street sound data, which was a very inspiring moment for me, because again, 10 years ago, I didn't see too much data-driven experiences, and I was trying to record the sound of the street as a memory, because I was imagining data can be a form of memory, not just a bunch of numbers to just make some statistical context. That was a really interesting finding. Actually, in 2009, I was playing with Arduino, my very first physical interaction design experiments with sensors. It was I remember a sonar sensor that was sensing my hand. And it was so funny that radar activity, when I plot those numbers and into lines and points, I found it like a painting. And my instructor was saying, it's not a painting, it's just a bunch of numbers. Don't reflect this kind of very design oriented critic happened in my first time seeing data live. But to be honest, the same idea, I was always inspired that when we detach ego from data, there is some interesting thing starts to happen. Meaning the personality inside data, what is the most objective data in the world? I don't know. What is the most subjective data in the world? Clearly our own information. But the other one is really very interesting to find out. And the third thing is, I found that when we focus on collective data or collective memories specifically, the ethically thinking about those narratives became much more I think, about everyone in the world. So, I mean, who owns a tree? Who owns the space? Who owns the clouds? Who owns the, like, this kind of narratives became to me much inspiring. And suddenly I think it destroyed these cliche ethical problems, which we are every day become the products of these, sometimes these algorithms, what we eat, what we say, what we go, where we, I mean, what we read, what we buy, what we watch is of course defined by systems. And it's not, again, I'm not a visual thinker, but saying that there are still a lot of like opportunity to find out how that clusters of information that we as humanity brought back, left behind us, can be repurposed to generate exciting narratives in arts. Not another startup product, not another, like, you know, something to sell, but an experience of humanity. So that's my take that really inspires me, that ethically as a studio, we spend sometimes more time than finding data to clean data, curate data. Like, for example, just recently for the space data, we were lucky because NASA GPL ISS data was already very clean. I mean, Hubble telescope recording, you know, thousands, millions years of light away from us, or ISS data are selfie of the Earth, or MRO, a machine that in Mars. So these are, I think, ethically very, to me, ethical data sets that belongs to humanity. But, or the nature itself to me,
cultural institutions of the sort.
Exactly. So for me, like last 10 years, my mindset is always looking like, how can I find the most ethical data to narrate something inspiring, poetic, and again, artful, and has an artistic merit. So it's doable, but it takes some time to go through that, you know, opportunist mindset to a much more ethical mindset, where you look for pigmentation of context and discourse that is not defined by someone's personal life. Again, it's doable, but believe me, it's taking an intense amount of time for me and the team to just make that ethical data for AI.
Okay, excellent. I think that leads
James,
very well. Sorry,
James,
go
if
ahead.
I may, one of the art, of course, can have a role in making tactical interventions into this field, and actually creating a, you know, concrete ethical interventions. And if I may, I'll just share you an example of this.
Okay, perfect.
Which is a work by Daniel Howe and Bill Posters. It's called Spectre. I don't know whether you can see this. I hope you can.
Yes, it's working.
And it's a work that seeks to well, what it does, first of all, it as you enter these booths, enter in front of these obviously monoliths, recalling the monolith in 2001. Your data is taken. There's machine learning algorithms are appropriating your facial image, they're speculating on your age data, your gender, and so on. And this all comes up in front of another user, on another screen. And then the user can use all this data to make you into a target for political campaigning and political advertising. And one feature of the work is this wonderful deep fake.
Imagine this for a second. One man with total control of billions of people's stolen data, all their secrets, their lives, their futures. I owe it all to Spectre. Spectre showed me that whoever controls the data controls the future.
So you know, part of the work is this you know, personalities who become instrumentalized through this use of deepfake technology, and that's an example. So my point is that art, in what's interesting about this domain is that artists working with machine learning can significantly intervene in the kind of processes that are opaque to us, and actually sort of render them visible and allow us to enter into those processes.
Interesting, wonderful. I think that leads very well into the next area, which is like, obviously now we have in digital art, we have a collaboration with people with AI, machine learning, and artists like Refik. and you're kind of bringing together all of these disciplines and creating something magical in some ways. And it's so interesting to have all of these kind of cross-pollination of ideas, whereby Refik's using the cutting edge algorithms that David's people are helping to create, and where do we think this is going? And we were discussing this in the pre-panel. Are scientists really artists in another way? Richard disagreed. He thought they were creative but not artists. But I'd love to open this one up to the floor as well. Refik, I think it's probably best for you to lead on this one.
I think it's a great question. I mean, first of all, I'm not alone. I have a team of we are a team of 14 people, can speak 14 languages and represent 10 countries. So I want to just maybe highlight this part because, again, like from Da Vinci, like many artists who have been practicing in studio culture, that's my community. That's my everyday people that I'm interacting with to imagine unknown concepts that making dream to reality. So for me, I'm seeing all of us as like a working machine, organic machine. So maybe I have a different take on that. Like, for example, we are trying to explore horizontal studio culture. We are trying to explore everyone can become anyone culture, meaning I can be an architect for 1 hour, I can be like a philosopher for half an hour, AI engineer, data scientist. So we are trying to deconstruct these very cliche boundaries of identities and titles. And it's a really interesting, fun model of imagination, because you said a bit respectfully, by the way. I'm not trying to say that I'm a neuroscientist or I'm a neurosurgeon at all. I'm just saying, as I'm putting yourself in the mindset of that mind who just may encounter a problem or solve a problem. I don't think it's possible by just wishful thinking, right? You just need one more step ahead than that. You feel what you are saying and how you are approaching that problem or creativity. So I find it fascinatingly exciting. Like last 7-8 years, we are trying this respectfully, and I can tell that it is a very inspiring model that is not bringing any problem, in fact bringing solutions, and then allows us to become more connected as a team. And it just goes beyond cliche egocentric artistic journey. So learning is easier, research is easier, fail is much easier. A lot of failures, which is exciting. That's where I think the many projects comes alive. So that's my take actually. I think instead of engineering, or instead of giving cliche title context, how can we deconstruct them and make a new one from all? It's very inspiring.
Okay, wonderful. Marina, I think this one kind of naturally dovetails into you.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, for instance, at the Design Academy in Eindhoven, where I direct the Master in Social Design, we are cooks and engineers and designers and performers, actors, and many other people come together to think about these questions about, first of all, what society could be, right? That's the question about social design, and includes conversations like the ones we are having. And to me, what is exciting also as an architect is that very often when you only hang out with the people from your own, discipline, it's very difficult to challenge the canon. So for me now, being next to Richard and Refik and David opens up possibilities about what architecture could be. So what Refik is saying about art, I immediately transforming it in my mind into architecture spaces to say, okay, yeah, art is fantastic, but I see, also the possibility of, Refik was saying, becoming an architect for an hour or two, and how these ideas that he's developing with the support of many other brains could actually transform the built environment and the way in which we think about cities, the places where we live. And that's where, to me, also the very exciting aspect resides as an architect. So I think this kind of collaboration across institutions, across disciplines, across the private and the public sector is fundamental as well to bring together on emerging ideas and thinking about new worlds to come. And it connects with many ways also my resistance to the grid and the Cartesian, because again, putting things in pockets and boxes doesn't help that much for creativity as well.
Okay. And David, over to you. I mean, I think obviously at Google X, you need creativity to come up with these moonshot ideas. You need differential thinking. You can't be approaching the same problems in the same way all the time. You need to be a slightly artistic and creative. And I know art and creativity is close to your heart. Obviously both of us are a part of Robot Heart and Burning Man, and so please.
So one of the things I was struck by that Refik said was failure. At X, we take failure pretty seriously. We don't view it as so much as failure as a chance to learn, right? If we're not failing a lot, we're not trying the right kinds of things. We're not being audacious enough. We bring people together from very different backgrounds to work on these problems. Because when you're working on a problem that could affect hundreds of millions or billions of people, right? We need all the creative ideas because we want to find something that can, that's the definition of our moonshots. We want to make significant impact, 10x kinds of impact on really huge problems. And the creativity aspect of it is completely critical. And we try some crazy things, right? So some of our projects, even big ones, like one of our projects was something called Makani, which was a way of harnessing energy from a kite, right? It was up in the air, wind's blowing against it. It's basically just getting energy from the motion of the wind, right? Turned out that it wasn't economically feasible and there were better ways of doing it, right? And so the project shut down. But we learned a tremendous amount in that process. And we're not afraid that some of our things are going to fail, and that sort of acknowledgement up front that failure is okay, and you just pick yourself up and try something new and try to solve it a different way. I think that's really important. And I think in art, like, the show has to go on tomorrow and it's got to be done, right? It pushes you to find a creative way to get something out there that's going to meet your vision by that deadline. I think we try to bring some of that into what we do at X.
Excellent. Richard?
Well, I'm pleased to say I find myself in total agreement with Marina on this. I mean, I think the digital domain really has released a tremendous wellspring of creativity, and part of the core of that is to have lots of different people talking to each other who perhaps didn't talk to each other before. I mean, this is true not simply it's true in the arts itself, I think. The digital domain is a catalyst for interdisciplinarity between filmmakers and performers and between musicians and digital artists and so on. I mean, sound artists, the barriers, the boundaries are collapsing, and constantly new forms of expression are being created, and this is tremendously exciting and really positive. And also at the same time, I think that of course the collaboration between artists and scientists has quite a long history by now, but it certainly has provided this incredible impetus for that also to expand in all kinds of ways. I mean, obviously Refik's work and practice is just a case in point among many.
Yeah. Okay. Wonderful. Last question. What is the role of AI and our responsibility as practitioners within this field to create positive social impact with the technology? I guess, Refik, I'll start with you.
Yes, I think it's from the social impact. I mean, I'm doing my very best last 5 years in every single exhibition we do with AI. I am openly sharing the name of the algorithm, where data comes from, which kind of sort of augmentation we are doing. I am extremely open about this context because of responsibility. As we discussed in the first question, there is invisible design of this, technology is one of the fundamental challenges because we don't know what they are doing, right? Black box problem. So that's, I found myself very responsible for every single exhibition to do it publicly, while it created my copycats, which is fine, because at the meantime, I know that majority of the audience has awareness of the name of the algorithm, who invented it and for which reasons. So I found it very purposeful and impactful for the young generations. And the second impact is, for example, with the project with University of California, San Francisco, it was an unfortunate event. I learned my uncle had an Alzheimer's, and I was trying to find a way to represent the moment of remembering. And thanks to the neuroscientists, we were able to use AI to create a tool that can recognize the EEG patterns of remembering. That was an art project, but also the outcome became a free tool for scientists. So while we have a creative outcome, the practical outcome also became a truly tool every day a neuroscientist can use. The other one is for NASA GPL. We created a tool that is clustering every single NASA GPL archives where you can see outcomes. I feel like even though an artist doesn't need to be responsible or have a direct I guess responsibility about making things functional in the very ancient art context, I do believe that we are changing this paradigm, and now we have to give back definitely to the community with some functional tools. Is my take on that answer.
Okay, wonderful. And David, I know we were talking about this in the pre-panel about how Google is, having some of these AI and robots to help older people who feel disconnected. And yeah, I'd just like you to expand on that.
Oh, sure. So
and just in general on how AI and machine learning is having a positive social impact.
Sure. So the two things. First, I think as technologists, entrepreneurs, and humans, we have a great responsibility to attempt to do good with our time here and the work that we do. So straight up, I think that's all of our responsibility, and we should come at it with humility and not any kind of God complex that we know exactly what's right, because all of us have things to learn about unintended consequences and things like that. So that's, I think, an important part of this. In terms of machine learning and AI helping, it's everywhere. It's in your suggestions it's making in your word processor. It's in algorithms that are detecting diseases from images much better than before. It's in the technology, of course, in self-driving cars, which are preventing accidents. It's in the machine learning. There's a project we have called Tidal, which is attempting to improve ocean health by focusing on doing more sustainable fish farming. And they're using machine learning to tell what's really happening under the water and how much food's really being eaten, how much is needed. And so they're no longer overfeeding, which reduces a lot of the waste that was happening in fish farms. There's a project we have on agriculture. The dirt in our world is massively overfarmed, and it's a great risk going forward. And that team is using machine learning robots to monitor plants and fields, detect diseases, sometimes cut down weeds, without having to use pesticides, things like that. To try to make the world better and fix some of these challenges. Okay,
and Richard.
Well, that's very interesting to hear David, and very important comments, I think, because I sort of sounded the alarm over the role of algorithms in our daily lives, and indeed there are cause for concern. But yes, I mean, at the same time, of course, in everyday senses, there's an amazing amount of good and social improvement that algorithms are bringing to bear on our everyday lives. What we discussed in the pre-panel was at the Art Machines conference. We had this roboticist from Georgia Tech, Ayanna Howard. Some of you may know her, and she's working on with robots as tools for working with elderly people with Alzheimer's and so on, and kids with various kinds of mental disabilities. And she has found remarkable success in using robots and AI to actually as a therapeutic tool. And we shouldn't, I may have sounded off about humans and AI and the distinction, but I don't think we should minimize the value that can accrue to being able to have machines that can respond to human beings as if they are human. And for some people, that can be of enormous benefit.
And Marina?
Yeah, I agree. I guess there are many valuable forms of using AI for, health or ecology and many other questions that were raised. To me, there are two main points of concern in that regard. One is the data sets, that on the one hand, you want them to be as complete as possible to make their work well, and you be checked. But at the same time, if they are as complete as possible, that also raises a lot of questions about how they are handled. So for me, the question of the data set, more than the algorithm, is at the core of many of the questions we are discussing today. And the other is the infrastructure that goes together with, artificial intelligence. And as an architect, I'm concerned about, how many data centers we can handle, like all the type of infrastructure. And obviously also when we talk about artificial intelligence and machine learning, it's many times we forget that has material consequences. And for me, again, as an architect concerned with, the built environment, I will be very keen on seeing how these technologies could also be more developed in a way that they are not so energy consuming, because the data centers, for instance, some of the data centers around Amsterdam consume more energy than entire cities. So in a way, I mean, that's where I put my 50 cents, that I hope, in addition to, being helpful to many issues connected to the human, are also design the entire infrastructure in a way that are not damaging in other ways.
Okay, wonderful. I think we've, meandered around all sorts of interesting topics here, and it's been fascinating. But one thing I think that I'd like to see, and I'm sure others would, is your slides on what you're doing and where we're going. So I guess one by one, let's do that. David.
Sure. Let me share the right thing.
Sound, David.
David, your sound's off.
You're muted.
How about now?
Yeah.
Good. All right. So about that. So at Google X, we are a moonshot factory. We curate, incubate, and launch moonshots to try to meaningfully change the world, help the world, and by having breakthrough technologies that offer radical solutions to these problems. Some of the ones that have come out of X you may have heard of. This is a screenshot from the internal mind of Waymo, the self-driving car moonshot that started at Google X. They are operating in 3 cities around the US.
David, I can't see your slides.
Yeah, I can't see your slides either, David.
You can't see the slide?
No.
Okay. Can you see this slide?
Yes.
Okay, I'll move on. This is the image of the fish farming that I was talking about, on the machine learning that's going on to recognize the fish and their health underwater. It's part of how they're trying to ensure that the safety of our oceans. We have a project called Project Tara that expands access to the internet to places where we don't have fiber run yet. And they can do that at gigabit speeds by sending lasers, non-visible lasers, through the air. Another one of our moonshots is called Project Wing, which is a electric autonomous drone delivery company that uses electricity to power the drones. They can travel quite fast, about 60 miles an hour, and they can deliver small packages very easily. Another project that came out of Google X is Google Brain. And this was really what brought deep learning out of academia into a large swath of industry. Most machine learning that is done today at any scale is really done with deep neural networks. And this came from this early work, and a lot of art is using these techniques for some of the most beautiful effects. Another application of deep learning is for machine translation, question answering, and chatbots. OpenAI has released GPT-3, which is one of the great versions of this, and Google has a version called Lambda that we've discussed recently quite publicly. And there's a lot of really exciting things that can happen with this. Everything from these systems helping people write better and write more clearly, to being creative and say, hey, write a story based on these 5 works and mix them together and see what the output is. It's super fun. All of this is very exciting, and I'm very thrilled to get to work in this space. But there are some problems. I asked a chatbot how many vowels are in my name, my first name, and it told me that there were 6, D, A, V, I, D, and E. I asked it what's 24 plus 6, and it very confidently told me that's 36. Did I get it right that time? You can fool most of these machine learning algorithms very easily by sticking a couple of examples of the word pizza on top of this chihuahua. The machine learning algorithms recognize it as a pizza. That's kind of problematic. But it's even more problematic when you do it on a stop sign. If one of these vision algorithms recognizes a regular stop sign, but you stick 4 pieces of tape on it, it can change it into thinking it's a 45-mile-an-hour sign. That could be dangerous. The 2 ones at the bottom here are really interesting. The king penguin and the starfish, those are things that the machine vision algorithms recognize as a penguin and as a starfish. So clearly it is understanding the nature of objects is not the same thing as what we think. And lastly, there are some things that the algorithms are doing that just don't make sense to us as people. And so if you tell this very cool project at OpenAI called Dolly, you can ask it to do things like make an avocado chair, and it gives you an interesting looking green chair that looks like an avocado. But you can also ask it to say put 5 clocks on a table, and it will sometimes give you 3, sometimes 2, sometimes 6. It can create these scenes, but it's not really counting. And so there's a lot more to do and a lot more room before we can really say that AI is passing the Turing test and really understanding all these things. But I have to say, I'm very excited to get to work on it.
Thank you very much, David. Richard? I think you showed some of your Scepter already, yes. Spectre. Richard, you're on mute.
Mute?
Yeah.
How many of us make this mistake? It's just a perennial problem. Okay, I'm just going to share you one artwork, which is, I think, fascinating, and you probably know it, some of you, by Anna Ridler, and it's called it's the Tulip Project. And what's interesting about this work is that because of the issue of it's going back to the question of the data set. So in order to avoid the biases in data sets, or make explicit, if you like, the biases in data sets, she made her own data set for this project, which involved taking photographs of thousands of tulips. And the work is inspired by a tulip mania in the Netherlands in the 17th century, where tulips developed a flaw which creates streaked tulips, and they became very valuable. So what she did is she first of all created the data set of tulips, and then she ran them through neural networks and created this infinite mutating tulip forms. But the mutation of these tulip forms in the installation are calibrated to the movement of Bitcoin. So the idea is that the speculation that informs the tulip mania in the Netherlands is now sort of attached to the tulip work that she creates through the speculation that governs Bitcoin. I think it's a very nice example of how creative an artist can be with machine learning.
Yeah, excellent. Actually, Rafik's just done a flower immersive room in Milan, which just launched this week. So he's done something kind of similar to this, different obviously, but focused on machine learning and data sets of flowers. And also we have a data piece in the show where it's 100 flowers which are growing over time, and they're growing differently. And then finally, we have a piano in the show as well, which is connected to by Henry Chu, which is an amazing piece where every key you push buys or sells the coins, and the tones are changing depending on what's happening in the crypto markets at any one time. And so you can actually see the buy order or the sell order go through, and then it goes and affects his digital wallet and has a digital representation of that. It's very beautiful and engaging. And
well, and of course, the iris data set, of course, is at the origins of much of machine learning. So there's also a sort of reference to the iris data set.
Yeah, and seeing as we're talking about the tulip mania in Holland, I think it's very apt that we go to Marina next.
Okay, do you see my screen?
Yes, yes, we do.
Well, so as I said, my interest primarily was connected to this landscape that is very Cartesian landscape of the Netherlands. And here you are seeing Westland, one of the sites where there are one of the biggest production of agricultural products in the world. And in these 24/7 operating greenhouses, and most of them automated. So as I work in an institution, it's a public institution, I thought that was interesting to, on the one hand, understand what is the role of architecture in constructing these spaces. At the same time, bring these questions to the general audience and to the government as well, as we depend also directly on the Ministry of Culture, and we have a direct link with the government. So how these spaces are shaping our cities and our environment, and what is behind them. So obviously the Rotterdam has one of the biggest ports in the world as well, that has been completely automated, some of their terminals in the last years. Most of the people work as crane operators, for instance, because there's this always idea that automation displaces or substitutes humans for machines. What we notice is that it's not that a question of changing one for the other, but displacing certain workers for others, more differently skilled. As now crane operators are not operating cranes, but people through the screens in an office in the port. And also, we are interested in the proliferation of data centers in the Netherlands. And what are the politics around these centers? What is the type of energy consumption? And what are the connection to the land, how they get permission to operate, and how they are connected to certain geographies where the cable landing points happen, etc. So we are interested in how they are being regulated and how they are being designed, especially because our spaces that are primarily for non-humans, as these spaces are climatized for machines and designed for machines more than for human bodies. So for me as an architect, thinking through machines is also a way of displacing the figure of the human as the center of architecture and architectural practice. This is a very exciting image for me because it seems how there is a change of paradigm in the architecture, but also in the way these spaces are run. What primarily was maybe a family-run farm now is a kind of big corporations who are owning and running these spaces, these automated spaces. Inside obviously are so sublimely attractive that it's almost impossible not to feel compelled to know more about these spaces that have this machinery or beauty connected to also the logics of the machine. And as I said, that goes from the port to the agricultural centers, but also other forms of farm connection to animals, in this case the cows, that are also taken care by robots. And obviously, we want to imagine that there is a complete harmony between machines and beings, Again, this what's happened is the farmer doesn't have to be so connected to the cow anymore because all the treats are being monitored in real life in the screens. So there is also other forms of empathy and other forms of surveillance and even labor conditions in the farm that have been transformed. And as I said, yeah, we imagine that we will go here, no? This harmonious landscape where different beings are together and in symphony, but it's not quite like it, unfortunately, perhaps yet. So the transformation of this, the certain workers into the displacement of certain workers didn't come without protest, and that affects the socio-political landscape of the Netherlands, and in Rotterdam in particular, many workers were out of jobs precisely because humans were not replaced, but this type of workers were. Similarly, in these places that are largely automated, there are still bodies, but some of them are like migrant bodies who are badly paid, as this woman from the eastern side of Europe. And the cows are very well treated by robots, but at the same time, any single measurement that goes beyond the average of the baseline means that most of them will be probably sacrificed more quickly than in normal conditions. So for me, this goes back to what I was talking all the time, this idea of how we construct these categories of plants, humans, animals, and it goes back to the Cartesian theory and the animal machine, and also these Cartesian logics that to me are epitomized in the Dutch landscape with this super rational constructed man-constructed landscape. So I'm interested in how to perhaps transcend those categories. And why is that? Is because the categorization of being, as I mentioned in the debate, also allows too often for the exploitations of certain beings that are not rendered as a particular white humanist subject. And the structural conditions that I see in the Dutch landscape today and many other places, because the research we have also done in Shenzhen and in other parts of the world are connected to very historical terms, and I don't want to go deep, but for me it's remarkable to see this idea of the logic of the Cartesian logic imposed in the colonies, for instance, in the Indonesia by the Dutch, and trying to tame an environment that otherwise wouldn't operate under that logic. And I see the replication of this landscape of Westland and the 24/7 operating greenhouses in these plantations, also connected to the very dark histories of the Netherlands and slavery and the colonial times. Data sets. Well, that are also part of these Cartesian logics and were helpful for running plantations and bodies that were operating on those terms. So I think what I'm getting at, and I know that we don't have much time, is also these conditions that maybe sounds for many that I'm extrapolating and exaggerating in bringing together the logics of slavery and colonialism into this Cartesian logic that are driven most of these spaces of automation. For me, is not that far-fetched, because we see at, for instance, the project of Joy Bolamwini and as how she in her work was able to unpack and unveil the very biases that are connected to artificial intelligence and algorithmic design, and in the inability of certain algorithms to recognize her because of being a person of color. So I think these kind of differentiations and categorizations are very much present still in today's landscape.
Interesting, fascinating.
Yeah, so basically I'm going to this question, like what actually makes the human and what is the machine? And just to finalize, I think there are a couple of issues that are relevant perhaps for the debate. I was talking about gender, but perhaps for me, like the question of post-human, I'm not too much into this theory, but I think it's interesting. I'm more following what Patricia McCormack calls a human as a possibility of the human category as something that goes extinct, maybe literally, but I'm talking more like a conceptual idea of bringing the possibility of other forms of being and other forms of understanding our relation also to artificial intelligence in the past. And just as something that I'm very excited about is a conception of data centers that are connected to encoding DNA or data into the DNA of plants. And that's some sort of experiments that are being happening now. And for me, there is open up the possibility of imagining actually a data center that is like a forest. And this is one of the projects developed by one of my students at Royal College of Art in London that was exploring this idea of how the merging of data, human data and plants could actually bring very unexpected environments. So yeah. This is where I am now.
There's actually an Indonesian art collector who has merged his DNA into a plant as an art project. I was watching a talk by him recently. Fascinating stuff about where things could go or may go. And myself, I came from Manchester, which was one of the first places in the world to industrialize. And then once the technology changed and the environment changed, it took generations for that place to recover. But now new technologies have helped drive the recovery there. Refik, what's next by you? What's coming?
Yes. So I'm sorry, there's a lot of noise going on in London.
Okay.
I think it's early morning, and so excuse my noise moment. I'll just
That's not so bad.
You don't hear too much noise?
No.
Wow, noise canceling. AI is doing, I think, great work. So that's amazing. There's a very big machine, and they're like going all around. Sorry. Okay. So maybe quickly, I can show you a couple of projects, and I'm incredible to be everyone here. So basically, I think I'm going back to Blade Runner, sorry, but it's very quickly where I found there's many ideas in like last almost 11, 13 years. So in my next projects, I'm really trying my best to like find meaningful collaboration with architecture to embed media arts into architecture and go back to this practice that I started almost 13 years ago. I feel like there's a lot of room for architecture to become a kind of an entity that is beyond just concrete, glass, and steel. And using light as a material can allow us to go beyond, again, predictable function of a space. And also, like I've been like working with some data before, like almost now 13 years, I want to really go back to the same data and reconstruct it again, which politics of data, I am calling it, like looking for some social media data to like heartbeat, to like, human body signals, and find correlation between we as humans and the built environments. And also the want to explore more about Louise. I'm really inspired a lot when it comes to graphics and how they can become like a very three-dimensional environments. I've been exploring this frame concept like last 11 years or 10 years, I guess, like trying to find meaning in the data and algorithms. And again, I've been practicing in Los Angeles for a while. And then still, I think that the city has a lot of potentials. Back in time, I was always on the streets doing public art. But because of COVID, I do believe that, especially life after COVID, we may need much more public art than before. Art that is anyone in it in the background. And additionally, the data around us is completely changing. And especially in pandemic, it's very clear that we are becoming much more users of social media and technology. And it's becoming a kind of a problem for nature as well. So while I am practicing NFT space, I'm really trying to understand what is the ecological impact of these mediums, and not blindly use it for just financial advantage, but just to be sure if these systems have longevity or not. At the meantime, I'm a very pro person about nature itself, but also just to be sure I'm not doing something wrong by not knowing the transparency of the systems. At the meantime, as we discussed today, the technology changing who we are, where we are going, and how we are becoming new entities. We are now new control mechanism with machines, and also we are like in this new physical virtual space. Of course, the sense of displacement, which is an amazing, I think, concept for many artists working with digital space, how we can just narrate new ideas that are like making people connect to physical and virtual space. And again, this is a big question I'm asking a lot, but I think it's not an easy one to answer. As I said, what does it really mean to be a human in 21st century is one of these still the question for the upcoming projects. This is my team, by the way. I couldn't show you in before, but these are the team. These are my giants. I'm on their shoulders. I'm grateful for my team to explore new ideas. And especially recently, we are working a lot with data pigmentation, specifically working with like a climate change data also like wind data, temperature, and air quality, and trying to like carve this data from in different like conditions. And additionally, really looking for ways of like visualizing how the humanity is connected to each other, looking for the patterns of like specifically machines connecting us in the world, such as airplanes, right? Like how they are creating these networks in this invisible universe we are in. Additionally, I'm looking for recently more neuroscientific data, specifically the Human Connectome project, and also a project started 5 years ago while I was a artist in resident at Google, the project about the future of library. Like what exactly will happen to humanity once the AI become much functional, and how can we create a library of the future that is just beyond just search bar or just a physical entity of like shelves? What is like the AI's fundamental role in learning and remembering, and how can we like translate this logic? So also practicing in immersive environments and creating interactive AI pieces that are like most likely speculating the future of a library. And additionally, this is like this, and as James knows very well, this pigmentation concept. Like on the left side, it's almost 5 years ago, my very first GAN algorithm trained on the archival materials on the right side, which I'm calling it data pigmentation. As far as I know, this is the very first time AI data painting term used and speculated as an art form. So I'm really practicing this field a lot. I'm really enjoying optical flow algorithms, fluid dynamics, and understanding how machine decisions can become a kind of a form of art in different scales and aesthetics. By the way, in last 5 years, we trained more than 100 AI models, and we work with close to 5 petabytes of data, and really like obsessed with how the GAN algorithms are evolving over time and how we can really use them and understand the black box problem. And these machine hallucinations, I'm very grateful for Sotheby's auction. Finally, after 5 years, have a value right now. I'm really grateful for this 5 years of iteration of different data, different pigmentation, different canvas, and understanding like how machine can create this ever-changing pigmentation. And also I have to say that at Sotheby's auction, we were able to create an never-ending, ever-changing infinite version by I'm using a software called VVVV. It's a kind of open source visual programming language, allows me and my team to run the AI model real time, and on top of it run a artistic computation, meaning the AI can infinitely travel its own latent space and reconstruct the painting infinitely. So it's a new evolution of our work that I'm very proud to share in Hong Kong, which I couldn't be there, but I'm seeing the results, which I'm very, very happy to share with the community. And also, this is an AI algorithm and software we created like almost 4 years ago. I'm calling it Data Space Browser, which allows me to fly in the mind of a machine, literally with a joystick in 3 dimensions, and reconstruct some sort of like a hallucination. There's an AI model trained on Renaissance architecture, and specifically, I am reconstructing the facade to like, windows, to like features, and let AI to complete in between steps. And this is becoming like a very inspiring way applied to other cities, to New York, to like London, Berlin, Istanbul, Dubai. So we are constantly exploring how we can reconstruct the context of a city by using these algorithms. And also very focused on immersive environments. I'm really very much enjoying, I love AR, VR, no offense, of course, but I do still believe that immersive environments has an incredible quality of experience without wearing any augmented pieces. Your environment, your surrounding becomes a canvas, and you can reconstruct any kind of narratives by using light as a material. I'm really very inspired this specific medium last 11 years, inspired from the Gene Youngblood's Expanded Cinema book, almost like 11, 12 years researching this medium. And also like recently exploring like Mars archives, Hubble archives, ISS archives. And this is the piece in Hong Kong that get a significant attention to AI and immersive room. This room was, I think every single day I'm getting amazing message from the Hong Kong, and then people that are visiting. I couldn't see it physically, but I'm seeing thousands of people's messages, and I'm kind of in Hong Kong because of their beautiful messages. This piece is one of a kind immersive room in NFT formats, and I'm just in love with the idea of bringing physical and virtual worlds through blockchain context. And that's what James mentioned yesterday, 3 days ago. I opened a new installation in Milan in collaboration with Bulgari, It's almost 2 years of research. We trained our AI with 70 million floral photos, 16,000 species trained through the Smithsonian Open Archives. And this AI is not only just creating the experience, the sound you are hearing in this room is also RNN results from the natural sounds of animals, the forest, and the water. And thirdly, scent. We work with Firmenich, a company from Lausanne, and we invented a way that AI is real-time creating a scent augmentation in the room based on what the AI is showing with kind of a species. So the room is kind of, to me, is this multi-sensory environment where AI dreams this, alternative flowers. And then suddenly you have the scent augmentation and the sound augmentation. I mean, while this synthetic experiences in life becoming a new speculation, it is remarkably meditative, remarkably make you calm and disconnect from the life's patterns of anxiety to many other life that, brings other things. I'm really excited to share this project with the world while the multi-sensory experience is becoming, people are also touching the screen. So it's actually people are touching the screen and feel the heat of the screen. So this is like our latest. And quantum memory is going very interesting. Our research with a Google AI quantum team, Hartmut Neumann teams, we were able to get an incredible support and learn how to use quantum computers and quantum computer data to generate AI-driven narratives. And lastly, Frank Gehry's Disney Hall was 3 years ago, a hero project. The question, if a building can learn, can it dream question? I'm right in London. We'll be meeting with Zaha, the team also, and I'm following my heroes and their body of work, like Tado Ando, Gehry, and Zaha Hadid, architects, to just follow this idea. I do hope that one day buildings will dream and hallucinate and remember us. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you very much. Well, first of all, Refik, thank you for trusting us to bring your vision to reality here in Hong Kong. And we've had thousands and thousands of people who've, you just see the joy on their face when they go into the room, and smiles and awe, and it's just so great to be a part of it. And also just so great to be a part of this discussion for the last hour and a half. Just honored to be here with you guys and listening to your thoughts and visions and the way that things are going to develop, and for sharing your time with each other and with us and with our community. It's just been a real honor. I guess we don't have much time for questions because we've overrun by miles, but there was one question that popped up, and it said, I guess this is more for you, Refik. Do you think that an AI could start producing art and creating their own NFT market outside of having a creator control it?
So that's a very good question. I mean, I know a very great friend, Mario Klingemann, and he has been asking this question. I think he's experimenting with a DAO called Botta. And I think there are several artists experimenting with this question at the moment. Not sure if it is truly autonomous or still tweaking parameters, as we don't have a machine consciousness. I do believe it's just an engineered autonomous experiences. It is, yes, I think in any scale. We can use quantum computers to generate much unique artworks. We can create the autonomous systems that are constantly learning and even liking their own likeness. I think this is doable, but the question is there any value? Is the value becomes from the human machine connection versus an AI just infinitely make this while there is no ending? So I don't know which one is value for the audience.
Okay, fair enough. Well, guys, thank you. It's been a fascinating hour and a half, and thanks for sharing your time. And let's do it again. Let's do it again next year and see how things have developed.
Grateful to be with David, Richard, Marina, and of course James and everyone at this art fair. I'm very grateful to be connected with you in London and share this morning with you. Really grateful.
Okay. All right, guys. Thanks very much,
James.
everybody.
Nice to meet you all.
Cheers.